But we'll get into that when I'm talking about the bad shit about this book. This is the worst man to be your stalker. I'm a feminist, but not today. It felt like a 1,000-page book. It felt like I was reading George R.R. Martin. Blech. Gross. Oh my God. Like, let me get into it. Hi everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. A bitch is back talking about books. I wish I wasn't here right now. I don't want to be here. I hate it here. I felt the necessity to make this video because I feel like if I had read the book that I just read, that's in the title of this video, and I didn't make a video on it, I would have felt like I was wasting my time. I would have wanted to punch a hole through the wall with how much I felt like my time was wasted. That tier ranking I did of all those book talk books and having all those different tiers, this would have gone in the this is offensive tier, because I have never felt so thoroughly bored out of my mind and like I had wasted my time on a book. Again, I want to preface, if you liked this book in the slightest, maybe you shouldn't watch this review, just because I am all about not judging other people for the types of books that they like. If you liked it, I kind of envy you, because I wish I liked it. I wish I did not waste my time on this, but I absolutely thought this was so boring and I did not like it. Like, you know how much I wish I liked every single book I read and fell in love with every single book I read, because then I wouldn't be feeling this type of way. I want to enjoy myself, and there was something in this book that I just couldn't. Oh my God, I feel like I was obligated to make this YouTube video. I was not going to talk about this book. I wasn't going to talk about this book at all. I was just going to read it and then move on. And it wasn't going to be a YouTube video, but I was like, no, I can't. So what we're going to be talking about today is Haunting Adeline. Adeline? I like to say Adeline. I'm going to say Adeline, okay? Haunting Adeline, a book by H.D. Carlton. Before we talk about the book, I want to mention and heavily warn that there are a lot of trigger warnings for this book. And I do admire that about the author, that she states that there's a lot of trigger warnings. But also, with the amount of trigger warnings that are in this, if she didn't state it, that would have been shocking if she didn't state the trigger warnings. There is a lot of dubious consent, a lot of non-consensual consent. There is trigger warnings for S-word trafficking, pedophilia. It isn't pleasant. And for me, the actual relationship between the two leads is the most triggering thing of all. Way more than the trafficking or the satanic rituals. The relationship was the most triggering thing for me. So, Haunting Adeline, if you don't know what it's about, there will be spoilers throughout this whole video. I just want to talk about it, go deep into it, all that stuff. Just like how deep Z got into Adeline. Okay, sorry. Haunting Adeline is a stalker romance. It is part of a duology. I don't know if I want to go into the next book, but I also feel like I'm obligated. I hate leaving the stories untold, but Haunting Adeline is a stalker romance. You can kind of tell what kind of story it's gonna be. She falls in love with her stalker. As I say in many videos, Joe from You vibes. Adeline is a writer, and she moves to Seattle on the outskirts of town into her family home / manor. This house has very gothic vibes. It's in the middle of nowhere, and it's a house that's been passed down from generations through generations. And there's also a lot of mystery that has to do with this house. A lot of people say it's haunted. Bad things happened here. And Adeline's great-grandma, named Genevieve, was actually murdered in that very house, in the very room that Adeline sleeps in at night. It's a murder that has gone unsolved to this very day. It's something that happened 70 years ago. It was in the 1950s that this murder happened, and no one has solved this murder yet. One day, after moving into town, into the manor, Adeline has a book signing because she's a writer. Don't really know what genre of book she's writing. Don't know anything about the types of books she's writing. Don't know anything about the character. But we'll get into that when I'm talking about the bad shit about this book, okay? Okay. Adeline has a book signing, and Z, the male lead of the book, looks through the window and sees Adeline and instantly falls in love. Immediately sees her and thinks, this is mine. I have to have her. He says she's the first of her kind to exist and there will be nothing like her. He says, I've just found my little mouse and I won't stop until I've trapped her. He wants her and he will have her. That is his motivation through the book. Love at first sight. This is the worst man to be your stalker because Z, we don't find out his name until the 50% mark of this book, but Z is a world famous hacker and murderer that is trying to take down the government because of its dealings with sex trafficking. That is his whole thing. His whole thing is he wants to save the women and children from the horrific things that happen behind closed doors, getting sold into S-word trafficking. This story is really a story between picking the lesser of two evils because yeah, he's a murderer, but he's only murdering R-worders and S-traffickers. He's not so good himself. He's an R-worder too. But we'll get into that when I talk about the bad things. So this is the start of his stalking of Adeline. He is a hacker. He knows how to stay in the shadows. Every single chapter that is in his point of view is titled The Shadow because he's just very good at lurking. After months and months of stalking Adeline, putting roses around her house, making sure that Adeline knows that he exists, texting her from unknown phone numbers, scaring the ever-living shit out of Adeline, she meets him face to face. Yeah, it takes 30% of the way through the book until they actually finally meet face to face and have actual discussions, and this shit was so freaking boring. Anyway, they meet face to face. Adeline finally sees what he looks like, and this man is scarred up. He has a slash through his eye. It's giving Phantom of the Opera vibes. Scarred up and super hot. They start this weird dynamic, weird relationship of cat and mouse, where most of the scenes that they have, the scenes are non-consensual because most of the book, Addie tries to deny her feelings for an obviously scary and bad guy and wants to convince herself that she doesn't love her stalker. Going back to the mystery aspects of the book, this shows parallels between her great-grandma and the murder that happened there, because there's another plot thread where Addie finds letters in the walls of the house that were written by her great-grandma named Genevieve, detailing the events that happened before Genevieve's murder. And we later find out that Genevieve had a relationship with her stalker, and Addie tries to convince herself through the parallels between her real life and her great-grandma's life that the stalker was the one to kill her great-grandma, Addie's great-grandma, because all stalkers are bad and all stalkers are crazy. It's a murder mystery, it's a romance. Let's get into the good. Yeah, it was horrible. I gave it 0.5 out of 5 stars, but there's a couple things that I was okay with in the book, okay? One of them was the vibes. The vibes were great. It's October 20th as I am making this video, and I didn't read this book on purpose around Halloween time, but if you want the Halloween vibes and you want to read this around Halloween season and like spooky season, this is the perfect ambiance for that. It's super spooky, haunted, gothic vibes. It fits perfect for this time of the year, and it was honestly perfect timing that I read this around this time. It has a lot of similarities to Verity in that way, like the same type of, you know, spooky house. The girl is a writer. She finds letters that are written from another woman, just like in Verity with the manuscript. Sometimes the banter and the dialogue was actually really, really witty, and there were lines in this where I was like, okay, that's really funny. And Addie would say some shit that would actually make me laugh, and this book has actually genuinely made me laugh from time to time, which is saying quite a lot because, you know, it's hard to laugh out loud actually from books. So I'll give an example. Addie has a best friend named Dea, and her stalker, Z, leaves some hands outside of her house, some chopped up hands outside of her house from the guy who Adeline was with the night before. He's like, I'm gonna kill that motherfucker if he doesn't get his hands off you. I'm gonna send his hands in your mailbox and leave them outside your house. He's crazy as hell. He's crazy as all hell, okay? Adeline gets with that guy anyway, and then Z kills him, leaves the hands outside in a box, and then she calls her best friend. Adeline calls her best friend Dea. Dea says, what happened? She asks sharply. A hand. And another hand. 2 of them in a box On my porch, she curses, but my panic mutes the sound. Don't do anything yet. Wait till I get there. Go take a couple shots and wait for me. Why did that make me laugh? Like, oh shit, this is crazy. I'm gonna need some shots. Anyway, yeah, that was funny. And also, Addie's pretty self-aware. She says, I can smell you, he says. And if that's not the creepiest thing I ever fucking heard, I don't know what is. Addie's just so sassy sometimes. He says, t-shirt next. He orders, jerking his gun to signal his order. I lift up and slide the shirt over my head, laying back down with a huff. Fucking beautiful, he murmurs, his eyes tracing over the curves of my body. Fucker is lucky I'm wearing my black lace set tonight. He doesn't fucking deserve it either. Why does that make me laugh? Like, that's so funny. She's so witty and self-aware. You know, there's another scene where he's like eating her out non-consensually, might I add, and she says, I no longer care to hold back the sharp screams, nor do I stop my thighs from clamping his head firmly between them. Drown in my fucking P-word. Die there for all I care. Why is that hilarious to me? Like, that is so funny to me. Adeline was actually really, really funny. She said some things that genuinely made me laugh, and those are just some examples for it. And that also goes along with the idea that the other good thing about this book is at least the characters were self-aware. They were self-aware about how fucked up everything in this book was, and I will give it that. They bring it up all the time. She says to herself a lot, like, God, why did you make me this way? Why am I like this? Why did you make me like this? Yeah, I felt that. So that is the end of all the good stuff about this book. Now let's get into my ramble about the bad, because there's a lot of it. First off, and I could go on for hours about it. I can pick apart every single chapter and talk about how bad it was. This book was nothing if not boring. It was so boring. There was something about the way that it was written. There was so many words that just were so unnecessary. I could skim over paragraphs and paragraphs and nothing would happen. Not 1 ounce of anything would happen. It was just so boring. The writing was so boring. It made me dread. You could skim and take out bits and bits of some of the paragraphs in here, some of the chapters in here, and the exact story would say the same. This is saying a lot for a 500-page book. This book did not need to be 500 plus pages. This could have been 200. With the events that happened in this book, with the way that the characters were feeling about each other, it could have been 200 pages and it would have been fine. You would have gotten everything. This is the exact opposite type of writing of someone like Holly Black, where she writes every single sentence in so little detail, but you get the whole spectrum. This author just rambles and rambles and rambles about things that you just don't like. You get nothing, no feeling from this book. The only reason why I finished this book was because I wanted to solve the mystery of Addie's great grandma Genevieve and who her murderer was. Yeah, it can't be who I think it is, because that would be way too predictable. That would be the most predictable thing I have ever read. And I read Wed Queen. I've read We Were Liars. Those were pretty predictable, at least in my opinion, because I'm always looking for, like, yeah, oh, what if she's dead, blah, blah, blah. You know, like, I kind of figured things out. And in Red Queen, Maven and her had, like, no chemistry and stuff like that. Anyway, this was the absolute most predictable thing that I've ever read. And it was so predictable to the point where I thought to myself, that can't be right. Like, it can't be that predictable. I have to be wrong. It has to be something else. So I kept on reading it to be like, all arrows are leading to this person and this other person, but that can't be right. No way it would be that obvious. No way it would be like the Poe and Akatar being love. Like, that's too cheesy and obvious. And it was. It was the person who I thought it was. I even wrote it down in my notes. I'm gonna go out on a limb and okay, you can't read it. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that it was her Nana. It was Frank. I was like, there's this like point in the book where Addie is kind of like questioning herself. Who could another person be in her life? Another person that is involved in her great-grandma's relationship and Genevieve's relationship that we aren't taking into account. And then they introduce that other person within the next set of letters that Addie reads. And I was like, oh, so it's this guy. So it's Frank. It's the best friend. It's the cop. Like, it's so obvious that it can't be him, but it was him. And that made me piss the fuck off, because I kept reading this book just so I could find out the mystery, And then the mystery had to be so predictable like that. And I knew that the Nana was involved because why was she so obsessed with this house? Like, it had to be something with her. And I was right. And it was so freaking boring. And I literally wanted to punch a wall. I wanted to punch a wall like the character in the beginning of the book, Grayson, punches the wall. Okay? I wanted to do that. I wanted to be fucking Grayson. The writing felt like I was being dragged through the mud. There was something so boring about the writing. I'm so sorry. Like, nothing in the writing flowed. And they don't even see each other. The two leads don't see each other until 30% of the way through the book. Like, they don't have an actual interaction. I was waiting. This is the slowest slow burn I have ever read. Mari Zapata, freaking, like, you could read any single slow burn. This is so slow. This is way slower. Like, it was 500 pages. It felt like a 1,000-page book. It felt like I was reading George R.R. Martin. Like, and nothing actually happened. I just finished this book last night, and I really feel like the events of the book, what even happened? Like, what were the important parts of the book? I couldn't tell you. I couldn't do a plot explained of this because nothing of importance, I feel like, happens. She falls for her stalker. They have some smexy scenes, and then that's it. But, like, also, why would you read this for the smut? Because the smut is, like, all the way at the very end. Like, oh my God. Like, let me get into it. I had to physically force myself to not skim. And speaking of physical force, yeah, trigger warnings, right? Trigger warnings. I'm exposing a little bit too much of myself on the internet. If you read my Goodreads, like, I'm basically like quoting myself on what I said on Goodreads. There's a lot of dubious consent. There's a lot of consensual non-consent. And you know what? Yeah, I'm exposing myself on the internet, but I actually quite like reading dubious consent and non-consensual consent on like AO3 and things like that. But there was something about it being in this book. The way that it was written into here, it being a published book, being 500 plus pages, there was something about it. It felt even more non-consensual than it was consent, if that makes sense. In a lot of consensual non-consent books, I don't know, like, it's so obvious that the person is into it. But in this one, it felt more non-consensual than it was consensual. And I really think that maybe those things should just stay on AO3 as one-shots instead of a published book like this because, yeah, I don't know about it. And Addie, she has a fear kink. So that was most of the book. Most of the book was her being scared and her, like, getting off on it, which is like, you know, you do you, girl, you do you. But I don't know. It makes me feel weird because they talk so much about how Zaid, who we find out is male lead character's name is Zaid, how he talks about Addie like, oh, you know, I know, you know, what does he say? Zaid says, sounds to me like you don't understand a woman's body well enough to know when it sings for you, even when her mouth tries to resist. But you can't convince me that he knows the female body that much to know when it sings for him. There was something about him that was too cocky. I mean, he was too cocky. But, like, he was too cocky in the head for him to actually know when someone sings for him. I don't know. There was something about him that gave me so much of the ick. It was giving me the ickiest ick. He was so high and mighty this entire book. He was calling himself God. He was like, oh, Addie, I want you to call me God. I am your God. I'm going to take you to heaven and you're going to see the stars. Gross. Like, he was giving me such an icky ick. The ickiest ick. My eyes were rolling into the back of my head, not in the good way. Like, he was such a hypocrite too because he has this whole thing of like trying to take down traffickers. The thing is, he was talking so much shit about all of these R-worders that he was trying to capture, all of these like government officials and the president and all of that, who are R-worders, when he himself is doing the same shit to Addie. And Addie is someone who he apparently loves. The spicy scenes were good though, okay? The spicy scenes were good. But then this gets into the next point of why this book was so infuriating is because he talks so much about how Addie is the love of my life. Oh my God, she's gonna have my babies. It's me and you together forever, baby. Blah, 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 blah. Little mouse, little girl. Blech. Gross, okay? He says all of this. He's like, it's me and you together forever. But the characters were so bland, and the characters weren't developed at all. I did not give an ounce of a shit, one iota of a shit, for any of these characters in this book. Any of them. Addie could be switched up for YN. She was so bland. There was nothing you knew about her. They talk a little bit in the beginning trying to develop her character. Oh, she has like a bad relationship with her mom. But other than that, I knew nothing about her. Apparently, she's socially awkward, but that never gets brought up later on in the book. It happens in the very beginning, her being socially awkward at her book signing, and then that's it. And she's actually quite funny and witty throughout the entire rest of the book. She says this, okay? Zaid says, before you judge, I have not and will not ever indulge in what they offer there. And eventually, offer there as in like gentlemen's clubs. And eventually I get all those girls out, but they don't know that. Don't be jealous, little mouse. No one will ever be capable of getting my chicken hard except you. I roll my eyes. I'm not jealous, and it sounds like you have erectile dysfunction to me. Girl, she was funny. She was actually funny sometimes, and yeah, that was funny. That was good. Also, in the beginning of the book, they're trying to make it seem like, oh, Addie is this like author, and she has writer's block, and she's like trying to write this book. But then after a third of the book, they just abandoned that entire plot line. What happened to her book? They just abandoned that she's a writer. Her being a writer has nothing to do with the story after a third of the way through. Actually, anything about Addie gets abandoned after a third of the book. There were so many plot holes, and like the story was so messy in structure. Where was the editor for this book? There were so many threads that just get left behind, which says a lot because this book is 500 plus pages. This is what I'm saying, is that you read 500 plus pages and nothing happens, like nothing genuinely happens except for the last 20 pages of the book. And I couldn't even get invested in the last 20 pages of the book because I was so bored throughout the rest of it. And then there was also mentions of this like cold, eerie feeling going down Zaid's back as if the manor was haunted, right? And I was like, oh, maybe this kind of feeling is gonna come back later on in the book. It gets mentioned all throughout the beginning, and then after you get through the halfway point, never comes back again. It gets all like thrown out the window. I'm serious. Where was the editor in this book? Like there were so many threads, so many setups that they set up and then they never finished. Okay, and then let's talk about Zaid's character. One thing I did like about Zaid's character is that he didn't have a tragic backstory. Yes, he's all scarred up. Yes, he's crazy and like a little psychotic, but that's just who he is. He grew up normal. He went to college, majored in computer science, and then he just saw all the shit that was happening in the world, all this like S-word trafficking happening in the world, and he just thought, yeah, this is bad and I want to stop it. He became Batman after that, basically. Didn't really have that much of a tragic backstory besides that. I kind of did like that about him, but he was too much for me. And then there's so many quotes of saying like, she's gonna have my babies, I love her, she just doesn't know it yet, I'm gonna marry her, it's me and Addie forever. But why? What about her, besides her being hot, besides her having a seductive voice, makes her the love of your life? After you were like, yeah, she's mine, I'm gonna stalk her, she's it for me. What about her made that, like, what about it? He was saying all these things, but I wasn't feeling it. I think it had to do with the writing. They had no chemistry at all, besides the smexy scenes. Okay, besides the smexy scenes, they had no chemistry. They were saying all these things, and I just wasn't believing them. He said, it's me and you against the world. It's gonna be us together forever. I did make a YouTube video about if the book couple will stay together after the book is over. This couple, no. I give it a year before he kills her. Maybe, no. I take that back. I give it like 5+ years before he gets tired of her, bored, and then kills her. I could go on and on, but that's basically my thoughts on this video. Very chaotic, very all over the place, but I just needed to let it out. This is my ramble, this is my rant. I just need to let it out and make a video on it, because if I didn't, I would really feel like I wasted my time reading this. The reason why I picked up this book and started reading it is because I was feeling that type of way, you know? There are some books where you pick up, where you read just for the smut. Yeah, I'm exposing myself here, but I picked this up just because I heard, oh, there's like really good smut, let me pick it up. And so I picked it up thinking, ooh, there's gonna be like thigh clenching smut in here. It was so slow. My coochie was like, it was so dry. My coochie was so dry. I got nothing out of this read, and it just made me mad. It made me so mad. Usually with books, especially romance books, especially toxic romance books, especially smutty books, I let feminism fly out the window. I'm just like, I'm not a feminism today, baby. I'm a feminist, but not today. For a fictional man. Usually when I read, I just feminism, it's gone. It's gone, poof, out of my body. There you are. You know, I will read it. It's toxic, but feminism leaves my body. For this book, this had me doing the opposite. Instead of feminism leaving my body, it had me solidifying my feminism so innately in me. I was fighting myself throughout this whole book. I was like, oh my god, like the feminism was like solidified in me reading this. I was screaming like, this is not good. This man, he's like R-wording this girl, and it's not even in a way that I would like if I had read it on AO3. My coochie was dried like the Sahara Desert. To finish off the video, the moral of the story of this book, I guess, is that you can do anything if you're hot. You could do absolutely whatever you want. Like, rules don't apply to you as long as you're hot. Consensual non-consent, it only works if you're hot. I guess that's that on that. Please, I want to reiterate this again. If you liked this book, I'm absolutely so sorry if I offended you by hating on something that you like, but I'm not hating on you. I promise. If I could like this book, I wish I could, you know, so I didn't have to be feeling this type of way. I'm really sorry to yuck your yum, but I just couldn't. Like, I just did not like this book. It was just so boring for me. If you liked this book, I absolutely am happy for you, and I wish I could be you. In this period of my life, maybe smutty books are just not for me. Maybe they're just not for me, because this had me questioning things about myself. This made me feel like I should go to jail just for reading it, let alone people going to jail for publishing this. I need to be baptized. I feel like, you know, like the after series, there was a before and there was an after. And I am in the after part. Like, there was before I read this book where I was fine, I was living life, and there's an after. And in this after, it is sad and depressing, and I feel like maybe I should go to prison. I need to get my morals reevaluated. That is it for the video today. Thank you so much for watching. Please, if you have read this book, let me know your thoughts below. I just find it really boring. I wouldn't recommend it just because of that. If you have read it though, let me know. I will see you in the next one.